Carolina Vargas was 29 years old and lived alone in a small apartment in the Ñuñoa neighborhood of Santiago, Chile. Her life was simple, quiet, and somewhat dull, especially when compared to the constant glow surrounding her family. She worked as an administrative assistant at an architecture firm and had a stable but cold routine, as if she were always stuck in second gear. That Saturday morning in October 2022, she woke up at 8:12 a.m. to the insistent sound of a phone notification. Photos from her sister Luciana's baby shower, celebrated with all possible pomp at a beachfront resort in Hawaii. Her parents had traveled 5 days earlier for the preparations and hadn't even mentioned the possibility of Carolina joining them. "The party is only for the closest family," her mother had said with a tense smile during their last family lunch. After a quick coffee and feeding her cat Nico, Carolina decided to go out to run some errands downtown. Around 11:45 a.m., she was driving down Vicuña McKenna Avenue when it all happened. A car came out of nowhere, sped through the intersection, and hit the left side of her vehicle with enough force to send it crashing into the median. The metallic sound of the collision still echoed in her head as she struggled to breathe, feeling a sharp pain in her right side. The car window was shattered, and the smell of gasoline mixed with leaking engine fumes was suffocating. Still strapped in, she tried to reach for her phone, which had fallen to the floor. When she finally grabbed it, she saw the notifications flashing. More baby shower photos. Her mother had posted a video of herself dancing with Luciana under a pink neon sign that read, "Welcome, Renatita." No messages asking where she was. No missed calls. The paramedics arrived quickly and carefully pulled her from the car. Carolina still felt her fingers tingling and her knees shaking, even though her legs showed no visible injuries. On the way to San Borja Ariaran Hospital, she tried calling her parents, more out of instinct than hope. She called 3 times. No answer. Then she tried Luciana, who also didn't pick up. She was treated in the emergency room for suspected fractures in 2 ribs and a mild concussion. After tests and medication, she was left lying on a gurney under the flickering white light above her. Her phone was on the side table, and the only new notification was a sticker her mother had sent in the family group chat. A cartoon pregnant woman surrounded by hearts with the caption, "Love you all." At that moment, she felt something stronger than physical pain. It was as if they were rubbing her sister's happiness in her face while she bled alone in a cold hospital room. Around 7 p.m., after being discharged with orders to rest, Carolina took a taxi home. The driver, a quiet man in his 60s, noticed the scratches on her face and offered her a pack of tissues, which she accepted with a weak smile. When she walked in, Nico came running, meowing as if sensing something was wrong. Carolina collapsed onto the couch, still in her dust and blood-stained jeans, and let out a heavy sigh. She decided to send her mother a direct message. "I was in an accident. A car hit me. I'm okay, but I might not have been. Thought you'd want to know." The reply came 15 minutes later. "My God, Carolina, today of all days you decide to seek attention? We're in the middle of something very special here. I'll call you later." Her face burned with anger, but more than anger, it was a cold, icy sadness. A realization that hurt more than broken bones. She truly didn't matter. Carolina barely slept that night. Every time she turned in bed, her ribs throbbed, and the muffled sounds of the street, horns, a distant motorcycle, a dog barking, only amplified her loneliness. Around 3:40 a.m., she got up to get water. Leaning against the kitchen sink, staring at her dim reflection in the window, she thought about how absurd it all seemed. She remembered falling off her bike at 12, breaking her arm. Her mother had cried at the hospital as if it were the end of the world. Now, 20 years later, she'd been in a real accident and barely got a "get well soon." That was when the question took root. What had changed between her and her family? When exactly had they stopped caring? The next morning, around 9:20 a.m., Carolina woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. Still groggy, she saw missed calls from her mother, father, and even Luciana. One after another, insistent. She found it strange. She opened the family group chat and saw frantic messages. "Carolina, please call us now. This is serious. We need to talk to you urgently. It's about the baby." Her first reaction was to think something truly bad had happened. She called her mother back, who answered after 2 rings, her voice trembling. "Carolina, thank God you picked up. We need you. Renatita's in trouble. She needs a transfusion. It's a rare blood type. You're a match." Carolina stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to process. Deep down, something didn't add up. Why her? Why the sudden desperation after all their neglect? Even through the poor connection, Carolina could tell her mother was nervous, but not in the way someone would be over a grandchild's health. It was more like the anxiety of someone who needed something done fast. Can you go to the hospital? They have everything ready. You just need to sign some papers and authorize the blood draw. Her mother rushed. But how do you know I'm a match? Carolina asked, her heart racing. There was a pause on the other end. You had a test done at a checkup years ago, remember? Luciana kept the records. Please, honey, let's not argue about this now. That set off an internal alarm. Luciana keeping her medical records, the sister who'd completely ignored her accident the day before? Something was very wrong. Carolina promised to think about it, hung up, and sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of it all. Then she called the hospital where her niece was supposedly admitted. It wasn't hard to find the number. The private clinic was one of the most well-known in Honolulu. But when she identified herself as Aunt of Renata Vargas and asked about the baby's condition, the receptionist hesitated and then politely said there was no patient by that name registered there. Are you sure it's this hospital? The woman asked in a neutral tone. Carolina thanked her and hung up. A chill ran down her spine. They were lying. The question was, why? She spent the rest of the morning trying to confirm the information on her own. She called Luciana, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried her father, who answered with a tone that seemed rehearsed, almost forced. Hi, sweetheart. Listen, your mother explained everything, right? We're very worried here. It's a delicate situation. When Carolina asked directly which hospital the baby was in, he hesitated for a second and replied, at Kapiolani Medical Center, but they might have registered her under a different name. I don't know. The important thing is, we need you here. It was obvious he was making it up. That wasn't her father's natural way of speaking. He was usually direct, pragmatic, even rude. Now he was trying to sound sweet, persuasive. She hung up without another word. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel guilty for being cold with them. At noon, she received another call, this time from an unknown number. A man introduced himself as Martín Salazar, a lawyer in Mexico. He spoke with a strong accent and said he had been a friend of Uncle Roberto, her father's estranged brother. I'm sorry to reach out like this, out of the blue, but you need to know what's happening. Your parents are trying to transfer shares of Inmobiliaria Vargas using your name. Carolina's eyes widened. What shares? Martín paused and then explained. Your grandfather left you 25% of the company in his will, plus key stakes in projects like Torres Esmeralda, but your parents hid it. And now, with the company in financial trouble, they need your signature to access those assets and save the business. Carolina's head spun. None of it made sense. And yet, it made perfect sense. Martín's voice was firm but unhurried, as if he knew Carolina needed time to process. He said he had documents proving everything. The original will, altered filings, and a suspicious digital power of attorney signed in her name 3 years earlier. I suspect they forged your signature or used it without your consent, he said. Carolina vaguely remembered signing papers back then, during a quick visit to her parents in Mexico, but no one had clearly explained what they were for. She had trusted them, or at least she had until now. Your Uncle Roberto went through something similar. He was pushed out with vague excuses and then silenced. He's ill now, but he asked me to find you. He said you're the only one who can fix what was done. Carolina, still clutching her phone with sweaty hands, felt a knot form in her stomach. This was more than betrayal. It was a silent conspiracy that had been unfolding for years. After hanging up, she sat on the couch for over an hour, hugging a pillow, trying to recall details that could confirm the story. She remembered how her parents had always treated Luciana as the natural heir to the company, even though she'd never shown real interest in the business. She remembered conversations that stopped when she entered the room, meetings only for the more experienced, and the constant feeling of not belonging to that family, as if she were just an extra in someone else's play. Around 2 p.m., her father called again. Carolina answered on speakerphone, leaving the phone on the coffee table. Sweetheart, we need to talk. Can we do a video call? Everyone's here, even Luciana. Carolina took a deep breath. It was time to hear what they had to say, and decide if she was willing to play their game. When the video call started, the image was shaky, as if someone was holding the phone in a hurry. Her mother's face appeared first, smudged makeup, red eyes, and behind her stood her father, tense, leaning on the hotel dining table. Luciana hovered in the background, holding the baby. "Carolina, my dear, it's so good to see you," her mother began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Carolina didn't respond immediately. She took in every detail: the luxurious hotel room, the untouched food on the table, the gift bags still piled on the floor. Nothing suggested a medical emergency. "So, you're still pretending," she said, breaking the silence. "What's this about a transfusion? Which hospital was it again?" Her father cleared his throat. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time. The company's in trouble. We need your help. Everything we have is at stake." That was when Carolina realized they weren't even going to deny it. "You lied. You used Renata as an excuse. You left me alone in the hospital, and now you show up because you need me?" Her mother tried to interrupt, but she continued. "You hid my inheritance for 5 years. Did you really think I'd never find out?" A heavy silence filled the screen. Luciana, who had stayed quiet until then, stepped forward. The baby slept in her arms. "Caro, I didn't know everything, I swear. I only found out last night. Dad said it was just paperwork, that it was to protect you from legal complications." Carolina laughed humorlessly. "Right, and faking a medical emergency is what? Sisterly love?" Her father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We just want to resolve this as a family. You'll sign the documents and we'll move on." Carolina stared at the screen. For the first time, she felt more disgust than pain. She took a deep breath, keeping her eyes fixed on the phone screen. "I won't sign anything without reading every word. And honestly, I might not sign at all." Her mother's eyes widened, as if she no longer recognized her daughter. Her father started to say something, but Carolina cut him off firmly. "If the company goes under, that's your problem. I didn't ask to be excluded. You decided that on your own." Her sister looked away, embarrassed. Carolina saw then that Luciana knew more than she was saying. Maybe she'd been involved from the start. Maybe she was just trying to save herself. It didn't matter. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. I know everything. About the shares, the projects, the forged signature. If you want to resolve this, it'll be on my terms now." Her father turned red. "You don't understand the consequences of this. We're talking about our family's company. The one your grandfather built," Carolina replied quietly but firmly. "And he left part of it to me, and you stole it." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. On the other side of the screen, Luciana covered her face and walked away. Her mother started crying, but Carolina felt no pity. For the first time, she saw everything clearly. "You have until tomorrow to send me the complete documents. I'll review them with Martin Salazar, and if I find out anything else, you'll answer in court." Her father ended the call without another word. The screen went black. Carolina sat there, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. For the first time in years, she felt in control, even if she was trembling inside. Shortly after the call, Martin sent a digital file with over 200 pages. There were contracts, scanned emails, internal company records, and copies of her grandfather's original will. The most recent documents included an electronic authorization with a signature resembling hers, allowing the temporary transfer of her shares to a patrimonial protection fund controlled by her father. The signing date matched the week Carolina had visited her family in Mexico 3 years earlier for her mother's birthday. She remembered being handed a stack of papers they'd called routine company stuff. At the time, she hadn't even bothered to read them. She'd trusted them. "Stupid," she muttered to herself, rubbing her eyes. But now the cards were on the table. The question was, what to do with them? Martin called again that evening. This time, the conversation was more direct. "You can file a lawsuit for fraud and concealment of assets, but you need to be aware this will blow everything wide open. It'll become public." Carolina was silent for a few seconds. She felt a strange heat in her cheeks, not from shame, but from contained rage. "What if I want to negotiate?" she asked. Martin sighed. "That's also possible. We can propose an out-of-court settlement, but only if you have a clear advantage." She thought of Luciana. She thought of the baby. She thought of how her parents were willing to lie, humiliate, and manipulate, all for control. "They want me to sign out of desperation. What if I pretend to give in and use that to secure what's mine?" Martin didn't answer right away. "So you want to turn the tables?" Carolina smiled. "No, I want to end the game." The next morning at 8:03 a.m., Carolina sent a message to the family group chat. Short, cold, direct. I'm willing to talk, but only in person. Today, in Manhattan, at my apartment. No intermediaries. The reply came 20 minutes later, a voice note from her mother with feigned cheerfulness, trying to smooth things over. Sweetheart, that's great. Of course, we're scheduled to fly back tonight, but we can rearrange. Carolina responded with a simple, see you later. She dressed as she never had for a family meeting. Dark blazer, hair pulled back, light makeup, face set. She wanted them to see how much she'd changed, and how much they'd underestimated the woman she'd become. She prepared the apartment as if receiving high-profile business partners. She removed childhood photos from the shelves, put away framed pictures of happy moments. It was time to show that sentimentality no longer had a place there. They arrived at 3:12 p.m. Her father walked in first, tense, carrying a leather folder. Her mother followed, wearing sunglasses indoors. Luciana stayed in the car with the baby, claiming she didn't want to expose the child to a tense environment. Carolina greeted them at the door, serious. She didn't offer coffee or water. She simply asked them to sit and opened the conversation with, I want to hear exactly what you're proposing. No lies this time. Her father began talking, pulling papers from the folder. It was a new contract, cleaner, more straightforward. They proposed returning her shares, but with clauses limiting her role on the board for 5 years. It's the best we can do right now. The company's hanging by a thread, he said, scratching his forehead. Carolina flipped through the pages. I'll sign on one condition. Her father looked up, surprised. Her mother crossed her arms, visibly uncomfortable. What condition? She asked, trying to maintain composure. Carolina crossed her legs, leaning slightly forward. I want an official retraction, in writing, signed by both of you, admitting that you intentionally excluded me from company decisions, hid my inheritance, and lied about Renata's medical emergency to manipulate me. Her father opened his mouth, then closed it. Her mother laughed nervously. You're joking. This is blackmail. Carolina didn't blink. No, this is the bare minimum. Her father stood abruptly. You want to destroy us. She remained calm. You destroyed yourselves. I just want what's mine, and proof, in writing, that you know exactly what you did. The atmosphere in the room turned to lead. Her mother paced, calling it absurd, saying Carolina was being cruel. Her father muttered about dishonor, family image, their grandfather rolling in his grave. But Carolina knew she held the power now. And the strangest part was that she took no pleasure in it. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. After long minutes of arguing, they agreed. But this stays between us. No lawyers see this document, her father said dryly. Carolina shook her head. Martin already knows everything, and if you don't sign, he files the lawsuit tomorrow. The silence that followed confirmed they had no way out, and Carolina at last began to breathe easier. Later that night, as she reviewed the scanned documents, Carolina got a video call notification. It was, Luciana? She hesitated before answering. On the screen, her sister looked exhausted. Dark circles, messy ponytail. I needed to talk to you, without them around. Carolina said nothing, just waited. Luciana sighed, squeezing her eyes shut as if gathering courage. They lied to me too. The baby never needed a transfusion. It was just a ploy to get you to rush over. The words hit like lead. Carolina had suspected, but hearing it from her sister brought a different kind of pain. Did you know? Luciana shook her head. Not at first, but when I saw the documents, I understood. They used my daughter as bait, as a shield, and I let them. The silence between them was heavy. For the first time, Carolina saw sincerity in her sister's eyes. No forced tears, no rehearsed lines. Just guilt. Shame. I was complicit, even if I didn't mean to be, and I don't want to live like that anymore. Carolina took a deep breath. Why tell me this now? Luciana hesitated. Because they'll try again. They're moving an entire project to a shell company. It's a last-ditch effort to save what they can. If you sign the papers they gave you today, you'll be authorizing it without knowing. Carolina's stomach turned. How do you know this? The answer came with a mix of fear and anger. Because the accountant called me. Said they're using my daughter's name as the beneficiary. Renata's. They'll drag even a baby into this filth. Carolina hung up without another word. She sat on the couch, staring at the black screen, feeling a mix of revulsion and adrenaline. her infant niece's name being used in a fraud scheme. It sounded like a bad soap opera plot, but now it was her life. She immediately called Martine. I need you to review the documents they gave me today. Line by line, tell me if there are any hidden traps. The lawyer answered right away, as if expecting her call. I already have the PDF open. And yes, there's a trap. That clause about limited board participation, it grants automatic approval for emergency transfers. It's like signing a blank check. Carolina's throat went dry. I knew something was off. Then, as if deciding to close a door for good, she said, let's go to war. The next morning at 7:45 a.m., Carolina filed the lawsuit. Asset fraud, concealment of inheritance, misuse of identity and documents, and breach of familial trust regarding the administration of testamentary assets. The bomb detonated before noon. Messages, voice notes, calls from unknown. Numbers, even emails from old business partners of Inmobiliaria Vargas poured in. Some offered silent support. Others begged her to drop the case, saying it was better to resolve this privately. But Carolina didn't respond to any. She spent the day in silence, working with her lawyer, preparing the next steps. She felt the exhaustion of those days weighing on her body, but for the first time in years, her mind was clear. She was no longer the invisible girl in the family. She was the woman they'd tried to erase, and who now demanded to be seen. At 6:32 p.m., the doorbell rang. Through the intercom camera, she saw her father outside the building, face red, sweating, eyes wide with rage. She didn't answer. 30 seconds later, he started pounding on the lobby glass, shouting that he needed to talk to his daughter, that it was urgent, that she was destroying everything. The doorman called her apartment, clearly nervous, but Carolina just said, "Don't let him up. Call security if you have to." Then she hung up. She sat on the living room floor, back to the door, listening to her father's muffled screams echoing from downstairs. She'd never heard him yell like that. Not for her, at least. Only for money, for power, for control. The truth hit her. She'd never been a daughter, just a resource. Hours later, Luciana showed up, this time unannounced. She rang the intercom at 10:17 p.m., the baby asleep in her arms, wrapped in a light blue blanket. Carolina hesitated, but let her in. Her sister walked in slowly, exhausted, eyes swollen. "They've lost it," she said. "They're threatening the accountant, the lawyer, even Grandpa's old driver who still works there." Carolina offered a chair, but Luciana remained standing. "I don't know what to do anymore, but I think I finally understand how you felt all these years." There was a lump in both their throats, but neither cried. "Do you want my help to get out of this?" Carolina asked. Luciana nodded, almost whispering. "I do." Carolina stood and went to the kitchen. She returned with 2 glasses of water. "Then sit. We'll handle this. But my way." That night, seated at the kitchen table with a folder of documents between them, Carolina and Luciana spent hours mapping out their next moves. "They'll try to destroy you publicly, blame me, say it was all a misunderstanding caused by old grudges," Luciana warned. Carolina nodded, without looking up from the papers. "Let them try. I've already spoken to a financial journalist. She'll publish the story with evidence as soon as the lawsuit is officially filed." Luciana's eyes widened. "You're going public with everything?" Carolina looked up, serious. "I'm exposing what they did. The world can decide what to do with it." For the first time, Luciana saw something in her sister she'd never noticed before. Cold strength. The determination of someone who'd stayed silent too long. A little after 3 a.m., Luciana fell asleep on the couch with the baby in her arms. Carolina stayed awake, watching them. A strange feeling washed over her, something between protectiveness and bitterness. The child was innocent. Maybe Luciana was too. She'd also been shaped by that dysfunctional family. But the cycle had to end with someone, and that someone would be Carolina. With that thought, she finally allowed herself to rest. The next day, she'd deliver new documents to her lawyer, including files anonymously sent by the company accountant, spreadsheets of illegal transactions and falsified records implicating her own father. It was the final blow, and she knew. After this, there was no turning back. The next morning, at 9 sharp, Carolina was at Martine's office with the new documents. The receptionist led her straight to his office, where he waited with a tense expression. "They're already moving. The family lawyer filed for an injunction to stop you from disclosing any information tied to the company or your father's name." Carolina smirked. Scared. Martine nodded. With good reason. What you brought is strong. With this, we can not only freeze financial moves but push for a court-ordered audit. Carolina took a deep breath. This was no longer just about money. It was about exposing the kind of power that hides behind blood ties, behind the facade of a united family, and destroys those who refuse to play along. That afternoon, the counterattack came. Carolina received a notice. Her parents were suing her for defamation and misuse of confidential documents. They'd also leaked a statement to the press claiming their daughter was emotionally unstable after an accident and being manipulated by third parties with their own agendas. The attempt to discredit her was clear. Carolina felt her chest tighten but didn't back down. She called the journalist and confirmed the article would run the next day, with evidence attached. It was a risky move, but necessary. For the first time, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground. She knew it wouldn't end quickly or easily, but she also knew that no matter what happened, she was no longer the woman from the accident, and she'd never go back. The next morning, the article was published. The Silenced Heiress, the hidden story of Inmobiliaria Vargas and a missing fortune. The headline dominated financial sites and social media within an hour. Meticulous details, document copies, excerpts from her grandfather's will, and interviews with former employees painted a picture of manipulation, exclusion, and fraud. Carolina received dozens of messages, some supportive, others pure vitriol. Among them, an unexpected email from an old friend of her grandfather's, one of the company's first partners. He said he'd always known something was wrong since the elder Vargas's death and offered to testify, with records he'd kept for years. For the first time, Carolina felt she wasn't alone in this, that her grandfather, in some way, was still protecting her. By evening, the news had reached TV programs, and the pressure on her family intensified. Her father vanished from social media. Her mother turned off Instagram comments. Luciana, however, called to say one of the directors had resigned in solidarity with the banished sister. It was a small sign of change. Carolina stood by her apartment window, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. The city outside was as loud as ever, but inside her there was a new silence, the kind that comes when you stop trying to please those who never truly saw you. It still hurt, but it no longer bled. This story had left scars, yes, but it had also made space for a new one to begin. One where she was, at last, the protagonist of her own life. In the days that followed, her family's silence became deafening. No attempts at reconciliation, no apologies, just lawyers, public statements, and efforts to contain the scandal. But to Carolina, it no longer mattered. For the first time in years, she woke up without that nagging sense of owing someone something. She resumed physical therapy, started jogging lightly in the park near her home, and returned to writing in her old notebook, where she'd kept stray thoughts and memories since adolescence. It was there she realized how much she'd been diminished for so long, and how she'd allowed it out of fear of being difficult, drastic, unfair. Now she no longer felt guilty for existing outside her family's expectations. She felt free. Luciana changed too. She began working outside the company, at a small architecture firm in Barcelona, where she felt more useful than in any board meeting with their father. She sent baby photos often, and Carolina received them with affection, though she still didn't know if she'd ever fully trust her sister. But there was something different about Luciana now. A real lightness, not the performance of someone living to please. Carolina knew her sister carried her own guilt, and perhaps she was starting down a path similar to hers, one of autonomy, truth, rebuilding. And though there were no promises, there was a silent understanding between them. What mattered from now on wasn't what the family expected of them, but what they were willing to be for each other. No pretenses, no masks. In court, the lawsuit would drag on for months, maybe years, but Carolina no longer saw it as a battle to win, just the natural consequence of saying, enough. She kept meeting with Martine, now more as allies than client and lawyer. Gradually, other women in the family began reaching out quietly. A distant cousin, an aunt who rarely spoke, all with similar stories of control, silencing, imposed roles. Carolina started writing it all down, thinking of turning it into something bigger. Maybe a book, maybe a documentary, maybe just a way to ensure that if she'd gone through all this, it wouldn't be for nothing. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth, and most of all, she wanted to make sure no other Carolina would have to endure what she had without knowing she could say no. In the last paragraph of her diary, written on a Sunday afternoon, she wrote, "Today I realize the wound has healed. It's still there, visible, but it doesn't hurt like before. Maybe this is the freedom people talk about." Then she closed the notebook, put on a playlist of old songs, and let herself dance alone in the living room, like she had as a teenager. The evening light streamed through the windows, gilding everything. In that nostalgic glow of peace after the storm, her phone rang. It was Luciana, sending a video of the baby laughing. Carolina smiled. There was still much to resolve, but in that moment, there was also something rare: tranquility. And that, after everything, was its own kind of miracle.